Good evening, everybody, and welcome to tonight's Executive Committee. First of all, are there any apologies for absence?
There'll be a fully quorum, Chair.
Thank you. We've got the minutes of the 8th of February 2022. Agreed that I Simon, agreed?
Yeah, that's unanimous to approve the minutes, Chair.
Thank you very much. Number 3 is please any declarations of interest. If you could let us know before we start that item, please. And then we'll come and get you after that item has been discussed. Number 4 is that we do have items 9, 10 and 11 that will go into part 2. And there's a few matters just before we go past that motion that I would need to say about that at the time. Item 5 is questions from the public for 15 minutes, but we have none. Is that correct?
That's correct. No public questions were received.
Okay, and before we go on to item 6, I'd like to make a brief statement. And first of all, I need to say to everybody who came along yesterday at Bedford Square, I'm very pleased that we had a marvellous turnout to support those people who are currently having to suffer from the latest worldwide crisis that we have to find ourselves in. Members, perhaps some of you didn't know, but I am proud of my Ukrainian heritage, and so you will not be surprised to hear that I've watched the unfolding news of the Russian government's invasion with horror. I cannot stand quietly by and do nothing, and so I wish to raise an urgent item for consideration at this evening's meeting relating to the city's ongoing relationship with its Russian twin city of Yaroslavl. I have thought long and hard about this, particularly bearing in mind the friendship and good relations we have enjoyed with the people in Yaroslavl. However, I cannot condone the actions of the Russian government, and as such I shall be recommending the following to the meeting of the full council next week in the way of a motion. That Exeter stands in solidarity with the people of Ukraine, and the council agrees to immediately suspend its civic relationship with Yaroslavl. That it be noted that myself as leader of the council has written to Devon the Ukrainian ambassador to the United Kingdom, offering the city's support for the people of Ukraine in these difficult times. That it be noted that myself as leader of the council will be writing to the Home Secretary, advising her that Exeter has always been a city which welcomes refugees from all over the world in their hour of need, and it will support the acceptance of Ukrainian refugees and urges the UK government to consider an urgent review into the criteria to be applied to those Ukrainian citizens who are seeking asylum in the UK. That appropriate arrangements be made in cooperation with Inclusive Exeter to extend and engage support for the Ukrainian community in Exeter. So members, I'll be bringing forward a motion which will be up, which I'm sure people will want to participate. I felt it was important that I say something this evening in view of what's been going on, the emails I've been receiving, and the support that we had for yesterday in our stance here in Exeter, and particularly our ongoing support for refugees and all people throughout the world finding themselves in wars, conflict and crisis. Thank you for indulging me in that, members. And so we move on now to item 6, which is an urgent decision. This is This is.
Yes.
But I'll be moving the motion anyway, won't I? It's just a statement. I mean, I'm happy for the executive to endorse my statement if they choose to. Okay, I'll put it to the floor. All those who are in favour of endorsing that statement, please show.
That's unanimous endorsement, Chair. Thank you.
For a full motion, full debate will come to the council next week. I'm sure people will want to engage in that debate. Or what will happen between now and then. Item 6 is an urgent decision, as I say, for the Exeter City Council's response to the Devon Climate Citizens Assembly. Yes, at this point, I have to introduce the item first. And at this point, I understand Councillor Moore, you wish to ask a question.
Yeah, whenever you
Yeah,
talking now.
yeah.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the previous item. I fully support that. Just wanted to comment on this item, please. I agree that the Climate Assembly is a really important piece of work.
Councillor, we're not actually debating it. It's a verbal decision of which there's no debate on this decision. It's just, we just put it through. I see you had questions, so if you'd like to ask your question.
Yes, I will ask my
So
question.
let me just comment, you see.
Okay, fair enough.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I assume that Exeter City Council refer to this work as it informs decisions as it goes along, and I would like to know from the portfolio holder what the view of the place board is to this and how they will respond to their work. The other point I would like to make is clarification about the retrofit that's mentioned in the letter. Last week it was clarified this was something that Exeter City Council would be doing. Now in the letter it says it's something that Exeter City Future will be doing. I thought that issue had been resolved. And my last question is, I'm with the portfolio holder for Council Housing Development and Services could clarify the standard to which council houses are being retrofitted, as it isn't a passive house standard. So at the meetings of the Council Housing Advisory Board, this has been discussed and it's been confirmed that it's not a passive house standard. So thank you. Those are my 3 questions.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. First of all, this isn't a recommendation in the normal sense. This is a response that we have made as a City Council, and the portfolio holder, Councillor Sutton, will explain that in a few moments. This is our response to the Devon Climate Assembly. They asked some questions, these are our response. So we're not debating the future of retrofit or policy, it's not making policy, it's not determining decisions for us. All those issues that you spoke about, retrofit, we'll get you an answer, by the way, in writing. I want to make sure you get an answer. But we're not debating that. There's no comment from other leads other than Councillor Sutton will introduce the item and why it needs to be an urgent decision. And I have to tell you, it's got nothing to do with the place board. Okay. I won't say I do care what they have to say, but the place board and its members would have independently, through their organisations, responded to the Devon Climate Assembly. Okay? They don't report to them. They don't speak on our behalf. This is the City Council responding to the Devon Climate Assembly's 3 points. So it's quite clear what we're doing. So we'll get you the best answers, although they're not, in my view, directly related to this, but you will have more answers. And so I'm going to ask Councillor Sutton to explain why we're doing this response. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the reason that this is coming as an agenda item of an urgent decision being reported to Executive is purely and simply as a matter of timing. The City Council, along with a large number of other organisations, was approached by Devon County Council to ask for our responses to the Devon climate emergency work and the recommendations that came from the Devon Climate Emergency Assembly. timetable of our meetings of executive and council meant that it wasn't possible to bring this forward for discussion prior to the 27th of January. But I would like to reassure colleagues that all elected members of the City Council were approached, and indeed many of them did make responses, and indeed Councillor Diane did contribute to that request for responses. And those responses, along with those from City Council officers, have been collated by Victoria Hatfield into the City Council's response. So really this is just asking for the noting of the fact that this work has taken place and has now been forwarded to the County Council for consideration as their work tackling the climate emergency goes forward. Perhaps to answer any questions. Thank you.
Well, we're not thanks, Councillor Sutton, but it's just a noting. So, I'm going to move from the chair. Have we made the report?
Second.
All those in favour, please show.
That's confirmed that the report has been voted unanimously.
Thank you. And we spend time on those questions. We'll get used to the answer as we can. So then move on to item 7.
Chair, the Pinhole Community Hub is an independent charity on which I'm a trustee, so I declare.
Thank you. We've got a recommendation here, which is in 2 parts. There'll be no contents of the business case. Authorise work for the community group to assess the viability of the business case, and noting the recommendation of Brent Still, and we return to the executive and the council for determination. It's keep to that point. Okay. What I do first is I ask the officer to introduce. Then I will receive a question, and then we will do from there. So, because there may be a question arising from the officer's report, one of the officers who usually want to do that is what we've been doing so far. I'm trying not to make this up as I go, but that's what we generally do. So, I'm going to ask for John Paul Hedge to make recommendations to introduce the report. John Paul.
P. James. Thank you, Chair. This report informs council members of the work undertaken today by the local community regarding future development in the Community Hub. The council has previously supported the Pinhole Community Hub trustees with funding towards the high-level feasibility of developing the Pinhole Community Hub at Station Road, Pinhole. The outcome of that initial feasibility study is the production of a business case presented to council officers and members on Friday the 21st of January, and the full business case presented is attached for review of the report. This will be further reviewed by officers who will work with Pinhole Community Hub trustees to further develop the business case and the funding portfolios to take the project forward. The building is proposed to comprise of a new purpose-built library, a community cafe, a multi-use meeting space, and 2 self-sufficient business hub and workspaces with changing rooms for the adjacent sports and activity facilities. Subject to council approval, officers will continue to work with trustees. At present, the capital bill is projected at £2 million with potential request of council resources to set £1.3 million from still in Section 106 funding towards this project.
Thank you, JP. James. First of all, we've got a written question from Councillor Letter, so I'll take that one first. He's not here. Can you read that one out for us?
Thank you, Chair. In consideration of the external auditor's findings and recommendations as presented to the Audit and Governance Committee on the 25th of November 2020 regarding Pinhole Hub, would the City Council be able to assist with ongoing support if ongoing running costs and monies could not be raised from other sources? And the second question we raised was, are there any future proposals for the existing library site?
Right, can I deal with those two? The only second question about the library site, we're dealing with this report. This report you got before now. And I don't know what references he is making to all it. I need to understand that, because this is first come along. And when he's talking about any shortfall, I don't know whether he's asking if there is a shortfall, will I make it up? Or will we make it up? The reality of the matter is we will not. The proposal is there, and what we will do is, if that group found they couldn't raise the money or get a problem going forward, and we've been through all this with them, we will sit down as a council and we will come to a decision at that time. So I need to talk to Councillor Exeter, and I will do that to actually find out what he's actually driving at, and he's not here, so I will do that. So if that's okay if I deal with it in that way, because I need some clarification, otherwise I won't be answering it correctly and we could be running around all over the place. So that's how we will deal with that. That's okay with you, Mark, and John and Paul, how we do. So we'll now come on to the next set of questions from Councillor Moore. So what I'm trying to do here with the questions is keep the questions to the recommendations before us and to the report, as opposed to saying, I'm just asking a question in general about the heading. That's not what we should be doing. So, I think this is from you now. Councillor Moore, would like to say anything? You would like to ask us a question?
Thank you very much. All my points I want to make are in relation directly to the report. Welcome very much the work of the community and trustees to get to this point, because it represents many years of work, and the community hub is especially welcome in an area of the city where there has been so much development. There are a number of issues I think need to be addressed that aren't properly covered in the report. First of all, the report is vague about ensuring the building is built to the highest environmental standards in construction and operation, and concludes there's no direct carbon environmental impacts arising from the recommendations in this report. The building should reach recognised low carbon standard for its construction, such as Passive House or BREEAM Excellent. Every new building funded by the council must reach the highest environmental standards. To help reach our climate targets, ensure the community isn't left with an expensive liability to run. The one reference to eco-friendly mentioned in the business plan will not be sufficient to meet funders' expectations that new community facilities are built to the highest environmental standards. So I hope that feedback will help officers working with community health. Secondly, there's no mention in the report about the lease arrangements. This should be clarified. Without a lease, or at least the progression pays the terms of lease, then the funders will be reluctant to commit substantial funds, and perhaps we can have that clarified at this stage. I would also like clarification about the process that is proposed to be adopted. That any recommendation around the SIL will return to the Executive and the Council for determination. But myself and Councillor Kevin Mitchell, who's on the Grants Committee, are deeply concerned about this grant not following the agreed grants process that was put in place after agreement with the community sector. The grants panel will fund is there to determine how the neighbourhood proportion of community infrastructure levy should fund a range of capital revenue projects for communities across the city in a fair way. Similar projects...
Okay, can I just tell some more? I didn't want to interrupt, but this wasn't part of the question that you gave notice of.
I mentioned
respect the chair. I don't expect you to respect me, but respect the chair. Respect the chair, please. You're asking a series of questions here that Mark Devon cannot keep up with that. No one can have the officers. I'm beginning to lose the thread. There's a couple of issues. I am going to ask you to get more detail, and I will see if your questions relate to the report. So a number of the questions you asked at the start was about planning, and about all those issues have been, well, should have been dealt with within the planning application. If you feel as a consequence of this there are some further questions that you have as a councillor and concern, I totally respect those, please ask them, put them to the planning department in order to see that we are meeting all those carving and everything else like that. That's where that rests. Now you're getting to the last thing to register, you're talking about release. We are not doing everything here. We are having meetings. Those discussions are taking place with the trustees, and all those arrangements are being dealt with Mike Carson in the appropriate way. We would have to have a trailer load of papers coming in, and as much as I understand you and Kevin Mitchell, Councillor Mitchell, are on the grants committee, I have to tell you, it's got nothing to do with the work of that grants committee. Okay? This was a decision. This was a decision that has come to the executive, right, as a consequence of discussion that a number of us have had over a period of time with the Pinhole Hub. And this report details that. Okay? I have to tell you, I'm satisfied with that. And if there are issues around leases and all that sort of stuff, you've got to worry that somehow there is a raid upon the neighbourhood still. There is not. This is being quite clear how we're dealing with this within the still. So
can I finish?
So I need to understand, what are your questions? I will get you this about the low carbon and that's, what are your questions concerning the recommendations and this report? Okay.
So,
I'll give you a bit more attitude on that.
thank you. So my first point was that the issue about the no carbon wasn't sufficiently addressed in the report. Second is that the lease is a significant item which should be included in the report, but it wasn't. The third item relates to the allocation of neighbourhood portion of the SIL. And the next item on page 12, infrastructure planning, quite clearly references the Pinhole Community Hub. And it says that the infrastructure list does not include all of the similar projects that will be funded from the neighbourhood portion of the SIL, which for example includes schemes such as the Community Hub. So in relation to the specific recommendation that's coming before this committee, I would support that officers continue to provide support for this project because it's obviously needed and it's important for it to be able to progress. However, the report implies an allocation of £898,000 from the community infrastructure levy. So I would like a commitment from the executive noting any recommendations around the SIL would not return to the executive but go through and follow the council's agreed grants process that has been set in place through the council and is made reference on page 12 of the following item to this in relation to the Pinhole Community Hub.
I'm sorry, Councillor Moore. I am totally confused with what you're seeking to achieve or what is the detailed question you want. I've tried to explain this money is not being allocated from the neighbourhood SIL. Okay? So it's not a decision of the grants committee. They have no business over this. Okay? That's how. The SIL money, the remaining SIL, is a matter for the executive committee and council. And that's where that will be determined. Now, what does this tell me? First of all, we are to note the contents of the business case. Authorise officers to work with the community group to assess the viability of the business case. That makes eminent sense. All those issues that you raised, I feel sure these are competent people. Noting that any recommendation, any recommendation around SIL, this is a bit, would return to the executive and council for consideration. So it's already on that. This is telling you where we're going. And it is quite simple as far as I'm concerned. So what I really need you to help me, Councillor Moore, is if there are still, give me some detail, I will ask the officers. But there's a lot of time consumed. You need to be aware, a lot of time consumed in going over these answers for you. And it appears to me we may be putting too much information in these reports the Chief Executive and Directors about how we bring reports to the Executive in the future and about what we may think reported statements are helpful for background information and to be able to set the scene. It looks to me that perhaps it's not helping. It's not helping. That would be a travesty if I could do that. That is the issue. We cannot keep being pulled back all the time on all the issues. So, I know that's not the question that you wanted from me this evening, but I am saying to you, you asked for those in writing. They were very detailed, Councillor. They were detailed. And I will make sure you get the detailed answer that your questions deserve. I think I'm being quite fair in that. So thank you very much. So, those are recommendations. I know James, and I'm going to open up to the floor, and I know Councillor Harvey wanted to come in. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. The Pinhole Hub has been a project initiated and driven by the people of Pinhole. It is not a City Council top-down request for the community to do something. It has come from the community. The concept started when the County Council were looking at saving funds from the library service, and before they had discovered that moving into a trust would reduce the business rates payable on buildings, and the County Council were minded, as I understand it, to shut the library in Pinhole. This would have alienated a huge number of residents from library services, and even worse, the 2,500 new homes which have been built in Pinhole and are being built in Pinhole, plus the thousands more on our north-eastern border being built by Devon, would be people who would be completely cut off from library services. The people of Pinhole were unhappy about this, and rightly so. They developed their own committee. They looked at how they could develop services and what they could do. They spoke to the newly formed Libraries Trust and the leader, and they decided to go out to public consultation. From public consultation, it appeared that a building on the green space of the Pinhole Station Road playing fields, next to the newly developed children's play park, the Mugger, the escape ramp was going to be installed, and the BMX track was going to be installed, would create a wide-ranging hub with all the facilities that would be described by James in the hub itself. Is the community keen on this? Unbelievably so. I was at a meeting today, and I better not tell you who the meeting was with, but it's somebody who isn't in the business plan, but has committed their organisation to meeting at and hiring rooms at the new hub. This is going to be a fantastic facility, funded by SIL in one way or another, part funded by SIL. It appears that nobody has recognised the fact that the community of Pinhole has promised to raise £750,000 themselves towards this facility. This isn't coming asking for, let's have it all please. This is an organisation who have created a fantastic business plan, who are prepared to raise money themselves, and have a hugely competent and organised committee to run this building when it arrives. I recommend this to you. I know that the recommendations do not allocate funding. They simply authorise officers to work with the community group. That's simply what they do to assess the viability of the business case. It doesn't talk about any allocation of funds. And I recommend this to you. I think there is nothing but good that can come out of this to maintain the library service, which is a stalwart for the education of youngsters. If you could see the number of parents and toddler groups that meet there on a Tuesday morning, and the people that meet there, and the lack of facilities, the
requirement for a facility, a community facility is really needed in that area. And as Councillor Harvey said, what is proposed here is to support the officers looking at the business case and the recommendations that we looked at SIL. After all, SIL has got two proportions. We're not talking about 15% that was related to the community grants program. We are talking about the other SIL. So it is, that's what the 85% of SIL is for the communities and for infrastructure development happening is to support doing infrastructure to support the community there because of the amount of building that had happened. So we have here a very good business case. I was witnessing the charity has come to Exeter City Council and presented the case, and we looked at the case and we were very impressed with the details of that case. So I fully support the proposal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, so those are the two recommendations that I've already put there. Can I move them from the chair?
A second, Chair.
All those in favour?
I can acknowledge now to vote in favour of the recommendations, which have been carried, Chair.
Thank you very much. Well, now we move on to item 8, which is the annual infrastructure statement. And, sorry? Yeah. So, this is your moment, Councillor Walsh. You've got one recommendation here to read to us. Councillor Walsh.
Nice and easy as well. That the executive notes the content and publication of the annual infrastructure statement for 2021.
Thank you. Bindu, Bindu, please.
Thank you, Chair. This report highlights and provided by Silver the Council's annual infrastructure funding statement for 2021, which sets out information on community infrastructure levy in Section 106 funds. The report sets out simply factual information on our obligations and identifies possible infrastructure projects without making a financial commitment to these. For that reason, its approval is delegated to the Acting Service Lead for City Development with agreement from the Leader of the Council and consideration from the Member Working Party. This statement has been available on the Council website since December last year as required, and George will have me to any questions members might have.
Thank you, Bindu. Councillor Moore. I think we've got 3 questions.
Thank you. I'd just like clarification, first of all, just about sustainable transport measures. Does that include road building? Because obviously that doesn't contribute well towards improving air quality or reducing carbon emissions. I just wanted to clarify that. And the brief for the review of the community infrastructure levy suggested that Liverpool Exeter sites are 0 rated for community infrastructure levy. So how will the still be raised for these projects if that approach is adopted?
Okay, thank you. There are okay questions, but I want to say that we haven't got time to collate them at the moment, so I can assure you once again, we've got the written answers on this, written questions on this occasion, Councillor Moore, and I can assure you that we will be giving you a response. And with regard to question number 3, I share your concern about that as well, by the way. It's something that I've been talking about into it. So we'll give you some responses to those questions that will be shared with everybody as per normal. Thank you for those. So there we are. Does anybody, I'll come to you at the end, Councillor Moore, does anybody else want to make any contributions with regard to the funding statement? No? Councillor Moore?
Councillor Morse. I think the report is an excellent report. Thank you, as always, for your consistency and putting the information together, because it's definitely not me, it's really sort of that. It's a statement of fact. It's very prescribed the way it needs to be written down, and all the information is in it. And if you have any questions, George does know the answer to it, so thank you for
But if you could all accept the recommendation, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So there we are, there's the recommendation before us. I will move it from the chair. All those in favour?